We're gonna go ahead and get started. John, Schoolmeesters, he's from Minnesota. He's gonna be talking to us today about color grading in DaVinci Resolve. And I think a lot of the things that he's going to talk about be a lot of specific to DaVinci Resolve, but the principles of color grading and color could apply to multiple platforms, multiple products. There's ways to do that similar color grading in multiple products. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time straight over to John, and we can get launched into this because I think he has a lot of great information that we're eager to hear.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. Looks like we got a smallish group, so if you have any questions throughout, just say it and I'll answer it as we go. If anyone saw my presentation at the symposium, it's going to be similar, but we're going to probably skim over a few things and go more into shot matching, different cameras, different angles, that sort of stuff, and some tricks and tools you can use in DaVinci to help out with that.
One quick note. If
Yes.
you're like in situations where you're in an office space where you can't talk out loud, I'll be monitoring the chat messages thing. So if you put your chat message in there, I will try to interrupt and give John that question. So
Perfect.
I will monitor that for you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I'm John. I work at McAllister College. I'm the multimedia producer. So that means I'm doing photo and video, but video first. And I love DaVinci Resolve. I think it's the best product out there for video editing. But I do use Premiere and everything else too. Okay, so we'll go into some quick tips just for kind of editing in general and how you should kind of work with color. Knowing your footage, like where your footage came from, what camera is going to be probably the biggest help for shot matching. If you know, okay, this clip is B-raw, this one is S-Log, and this one is from a Nikon, then you can kind of know how to set up a timeline to work with all those multiple different log formats. And then know where you're going to send it out to. Is it going to be just for web? Is it going to be for TV and for web? Maybe it's going to play on HDR screens. There are different ways you can work with that and make sure it's optimized for your output. Calibrating your monitor is super important. I have one of these guys, these little spider color calibrators. They're not too expensive, and it just makes sure that the colors you're seeing are the actual colors, because if your screen isn't set up correctly, then there's no way to really know if your shots are actually matching. You can't make sure everyone's screen is correct, so there's some kind of variance that's found to happen regardless, but if you can kind of do everything as much as possible on your end, it'll help everyone else out. And then using your scopes, so waveforms, vector scopes, just to make sure you're using the actual data rather than just your eyes. Because again, if your monitor's not perfect, or I don't know, if you prefer one look to another, I like saturated blues or I like saturated yellows, your scopes will help give you an actual mathematical look at what you're seeing. Okay, so I use DaVinci Resolve because it's made for coloring and it has node-based coloring. I can jump over here. So we have all these nodes that we can string together to put together our grade. And instead of like Premiere Pro, where it's stacked layers on top of each other, this allows you to add a lot of nodes without kind of slowing down your computer at all. You put too many layers in Premiere and it's gonna kind of chug a little bit. It's one-time payment. It's great for student workers because there's a really powerful free version. So if you want to make sure your students are learning this sort of stuff, it's good. And it's an industry standard as far as color grading goes. So if they're interested in color, I think it works really well. And you can use XML workflows with Premiere. Some of you may already do that if you edit in Premiere and then color in DaVinci. Okay, so being color space aware basically is just making sure that your project is set up for color grading. So you can go into DaVinci and you can set up your color management to be DaVinci YRGB, and then you can set your timeline color space. So that's gonna automatically set your timeline to work in a certain color space. DaVinci Wide Gamut is their kind of inbuilt super wide color space, and that means it can hold all the data from every camera that you shoot on. Aces is another similar kind of super wide color space, and if you're working with like VFX artists or compositors who are working in like Blender or Nuke or something like that, Aces will probably be what you want to work with just because it's more industry standard. DaVinci Wide Gamut is for Premiere, or not Premiere, for DaVinci only. But I really love it, and it works really well. And having everything set to a similar color space from your log profile will assist in making sure shots match more. It kind of calibrates them all to work within a certain color space. So we're gonna do that, and then I'm just gonna set my output color space to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. It's what I have my monitor set to look for. And that's TV standard. Web sometimes uses Gamma 2.2. It's all a mess out there, but you know, we do what we can. And that all kind of works under the hood. So you're not going to see like immediate changes from that. Okay. So this is just kind of the workflow for being color space aware. So your clips will come with their own color space. So maybe that's S-Log, maybe that's R3D if you're shooting on red, or ARRI C, whatever it may be. You can feed that into Aces or DaVinci Wide Gamut to have a super wide color space to hold it all, and then you'll output to whatever color space that is. Maybe Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Maybe you're doing HDR, so it's going to be like DCI P3 or Rec 2020. That just kind of depends. And this kind of shows you DaVinci Wide Gamut. So it's super wide, so it's that outside triangle there. And then all of these other color spaces down here just kind of are the like Rec 709. So Rec 709 is that smallest inside circle. So Wide Gamut can hold more color data than Rec 709, can hold more than Rec 2020 P3. Pretty similar to Aces. It's actually a little bit larger than Aces AP1. I believe there's a AP0 that's wider, but you edit in AP1, and then ARRI's Wide Gamut. So it can hold all that data in there pretty well, and it just gives you the most latitude. It's also going to work directly with some of the tools in Resolve. It's going to be they're going to like talk to each other in a native way. So for like HDR wheels, curves, your color warper, some of those tools, it just makes it easier to work with. You don't have to do this if you're just shooting on Sony cameras and you know everything is like S-Log. You can set your timeline to be S-Log, and that's great. You know, this is more so if you're working with like, maybe you get some Rec 709 footage from a freelancer, or they were shooting with Canon and you normally shoot with Sony. It can help kind of mesh those together. We already kind of went through this, jump past that. So power grids, I went a little more in depth into what power grids are in my talk during the symposium. I'll do it really quickly here. Let me jump onto a clip. So a power grid basically is if I save this node structure, and I can then drag and drop it onto any clip that I want. So if I just get rid of that, this is a B-raw clip that I just grabbed from the internet. Up here in the top left corner, you'll see you have gallery. If you have DaVinci Resolve and want to follow along, please do so. And then you have these different folders here. So stills is if you can right click, grab a still, and this can help. We'll talk about this. You can use this to help shot match, or you can export a LUT this way. This way you can export a power grade. But I also have this folder set up with my node trees. And so I can take this node tree, I can drag it and drop it, and then let me get rid of that. I have this node structure set up here. So I can drag and drop this anytime I want. And that basically, I don't use all of these nodes every time I color something, but I know I have this workflow. So first I do my CST to like input what my color space is. So I would input like Black Magic, what is this, 4.5 and maybe Gen 5 film. So I can input that, it'll change it to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then I have another one set up farther down the line to change DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709. And then I can go through step by step, do balance and exposure first. I have something that's kind of just cutting the highlights down a little bit. I can do contrast, I can do my saturation, and then I can do, my individual color changes to my temp, to my color warper. Maybe I want to adjust something with some of the curves. And that just helps me keep it all right there. And then I keep some other extra tools down here that I can plop on if I want to do more of like a stylized look. Dehancer is good, or shift. They're all for like more filmic looks.
John, quick question.
Yeah.
So I see like most of it's linear, right? But then all of a sudden you have these kind of stacks. This is a stack.
Yes. So I'll jump into those. I think I talked about it in a sec here. HDR color wheels. We can jump back to that.
Okay.
Okay. So
I'll look for that answer in a moment.
So well, let's talk about it right now. So there's a difference between serial nodes and parallel nodes. So serial nodes, you'll see it goes one after another. And basically each node is pulling from the node before it. So it's kind of stacking on top. A parallel node kind of splits one node into two. So then you have changes happening on both nodes that don't affect each other until they're combined together at the end.
Oh.
So an easy way to kind of visualize this is if I do this, I can change on here, I'll change my saturation to 0. So now it's black and white, right? And then I'll go down to PW2 and I'll change my saturation to 100. And then that combines together at 50%, which is our starting saturation. So this is helpful if I have these set up for power windows. So if I am adjusting highlights on one area and then highlights on another area, they're not interacting with each other and like causing a hotspot where they overlap until they're combined together at like 50%. So equal values from each. So it just gives you a little more flexibility. And if you want to set up one of these, you can right click a node and then there's an add node drop down and you can just add a parallel node. And then this little thing right here is just your mixer. So that just combines them together and then shoots it out to the next node. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a super useful tool that DaVinci has. We'll just reset this. Okay. So for fine-tuning control, I like to use the HDR wheels. You don't have to use HDR wheels. You can use primary wheels. So right down here, we have all of our different tools and I guess little sections of color grading. So we have primary wheels, we have HDR wheels. HDR wheels is going to speak directly to DaVinci Wide Gamut. They're one of the tools that kind of work together. We have our RGB mixer, our curves, so you can do like hue changes, things like that. Power windows. I like these because it's split up more than your primaries. Primaries, you get kind of lift, gamma, gain, so that's darks, midtones, lights, and then you get like an everything offset. With the HDR wheels, you get a lot more. So you get black, dark, shadow, and then you get light, highlight, and specular, and then a global. So it just splits things up more. And you can preview what's gonna be adjusted here. Let's see here. Yeah, so you can preview what it affects. It looks like we have a lot in our shadows. And I can adjust where my, with this little kind of red line here, where my shadow, or where it stops looking for darks and where it starts looking for shadows. And you can kind of feather that transition a little bit more. So you just have more adjustability within the HDR wheels. But if you're trying to move quickly, it might not be the best. You can just kind of jump into primaries. So for this, I'll probably just stick in primaries. I'm actually gonna delete this, and we're gonna copy this one. So we don't need all those nodes just for this. Okay. Let's see, is there anything else we need to go over? HSV and saturation are just two different ways to apply saturation. Regular saturation can sometimes have adjustments to your exposure. HSV is just a different color space, kind of like RGB. It's adding color density rather than like brightness to the colors. So I keep it in my regular node tree. If you want to add something like that, you can change a color space of a node individually if you right click it. And then we have HSV right here. And basically that'll just allow me to adjust color density with this gain control down here in the primaries on the green channel. And I can just get way denser colors without changing my exposure from like saturation. You can see like it looks really bad, but um, my scopes will show that as I increase my saturation here, it's moving my exposure a lot. So we'll set this back to 50. My color density is hardly having any effect on my waveform scopes. So it's just adjusting those colors. And if you ever see a commercial and you're like, wow, that red sweater looks so rich, it's usually color density that they're using to add that extra like punch to a color.
John, are you gonna go over scopes a little bit later on like how to read it?
Yeah, I can go over. Well, let's do that right now, actually. It'll be a good transition, and then we can jump into shot matching here. So in DaVinci, we have a bunch of different scopes in this bottom right-hand corner. You can pop them out into a separate window if you feel like doing that. So we have Parade, which is going to split your RGB channels into 3 different scopes. You have Waveform, which is what I like to use. It kind of overlays them all together. And then if they're perfectly overlaid, you'll get white. We have Vector Scope. This is good for checking skin tones. We have this little skin tone indicator, and that's basically this line here between yellow and red. And that's going to show us if our skin tones are sitting in a natural space. If you have our qualifier selected, it's going to give us a little circle here with whatever I kind of mouse over. And it looks like that circle is kind of split 50-50 just along that line. So our skin tones are sitting in a good spot. But, you know, if our shot was really, let's just crank the blue. Oh, we're in HSV. That's fine. If I just crank it really blue, we're going to see that our skin tones are not sitting on that line. That's kind of an extreme example, but kind of just shows how that reads it. And this will work for any skin tone, regardless of ethnicity. So it's just a good tool to use if you want to kind of double check and make sure skin's correct, because that's what people are going to look for most if you have someone in the shot. We also have histograms, which is similar to waveform in kind of a more like sideways way. And then this is just kind of similar to that chart that I showed earlier with like DaVinci wide gamut, Rec 709. It's just showing where our colors are sitting within Rec 709. So we can see kind of a graph of that. I don't really ever use this one. I mostly stick with waveforms, and that's going to tell me if my shadows are crunched. So if I really kind of bring my lift down, we can see on the bottom, all that data is kind of pooling together into just a crunched nothingness. I have no data there anymore. It's just pure black. And then the same is going to be if we take my highlights and bring those way up high. We'll see it all kind of bunches together, and then I'm just losing everything that's there. Um, I like to keep things below, if I can, below this like 896 IRE value. But that's just my personal preference. If you want something really light and bright, you might want to get it the highlights as high as they can go without totally clipping. It's just, preference of taste and whatnot. So I think waveform's probably the easiest to use. Waveform and then vector scope for checking skin tones is what I would recommend to use. If you like Parade and like a split view of RGB, that's great too. And then this little like icon here will give you more in-depth control of the different scopes. So sometimes your waveform looks like it's gone and you just got to turn up the value a little bit. But yeah.
So
Any other questions on scopes?
on the scopes of the vertical axis is your highlight, your value, or I guess
Yes. So that's going to be like
luminance.
your luminance. Yeah. And then as we go across here, that's basically giving like a luminance map of the image. So
Yeah.
if I was to like grab a still of this, we'll put it in this folder. And then I click on this clip. So this is totally different. We can see our scopes totally different. If I want to, let's say, check between these two clips, I can put them up and you'll see it split right on our waveform for where this shot is and this shot is. So it's going to show you exactly what's on your screen, but just in kind of like a more of a data look as far as luminance, and then also color balance as well, because you'll see RGB is split right there. So we have more blue than we do green and red. If they're perfectly overlaid, it's going to give you white. I wouldn't worry too much about getting things like pure white all the way across, because a lot of times it doesn't look right to the eye. So also trust yourself. We all know what good stuff should look like. Okay, so let me let's keep that actually. Turn that off. So I'll break down what I just did for like getting that split screen to happen. This is gonna, I'm not sure exactly how to do it in Premiere. I'm sure they probably have a tool for it. Same with like Apple's editing software. But basically, if you right click on an image, you can grab a still of that image. Great for getting a thumbnail for a video, but also for shot matching here. So if I grab a still, it pops up in my gallery. So that's up on that top left again. So we can see my gallery right up there, and I can see my stills right there. If I select a clip from my clips kind of area here, I can go up to this little box here right next to kind of my zoom percentage. And if I have the shot I want to put on top of this to like kind of switch between, I can use this little image wipe tool, click on it, and that'll put it on top. And so I can use this and move this between to see a more close-up view of, are these shots kind of working with each other? So let's adjust this one that's really blue to kind of to maybe look a little bit nicer with this other one. So right off the bat, our exposure, we can definitely see differences. We have a lot sitting in the darks here, and this is spread out a bit more. But just from eye, I can see our highlights are definitely a lot brighter in this first clip. So we'll boost our highlights here. And then we'll bring down our shadows, keep some contrast in there. And I'm going to make the midtones a little brighter just to kind of try and match the faces here. And you can use your qualifier to see like, okay, my skin tones are sitting right here on this side. And they're about at the same luminance value right here.
Quick
So
question, John.
yeah.
So I think I'm finally understanding the scope. So the scope actually holds like, so we're like on this left side, there's a lot of highlights in the top left of the frame.
Mm-hmm.
So the scope actually is like the physical location
Yes. So it's
of these
basically,
values.
yeah, it's reproducing the image we see right here, but in like a kind of a more mathematical look at it.
Yeah. So like
So
if there was something like really dark in the bottom right corner, there would be on the bottom right corner of the scope, it would be pulled down to the bottom right. And
yeah, yeah.
also we
So if
had our
I,
skin tones in the middle right now where they're kind of that's sorry. I
yeah,
just opened it when you said the two skin tones. I'm like, oh yeah, they're right next to each other. When you
yeah,
slip back and forth, their faces are right next to each other, skin tone wise.
yep, yep.
Okay.
So we can see kind of these like this like mid-tone value of their skin is sitting about the same level. So I can kind of get from that, like, yes, these are sitting at
Exposed
a
skin.
good level with each other because I want to expose for skin more than anything else because that's what we're really looking at as people. And so then obviously the next thing is the color balance. These are totally different. One is like blue tundra. The other one is like a kind of a low-con, I don't know, cafe where she's drinking coffee. So let's adjust our color balance here. We'll go up to our color here. We'll take it warmer. And then it's looking a bit green now, maybe a bit green yellow. So I'm going to add a little bit of magenta into this as well. And that's starting to look a little bit better. We can kind of, you can see we're looking a little bit closer, maybe a little too much yellow in there. So if I want to just adjust a single color here, like there's a little bit of like greenish yellow looking in our highlights there, I can go to my curves. And in your curves, you have a lot of different options. So we have this first one, and that's going to be like if you're using Lightroom and you're using curves in there and you're adjusting like your exposure and whatnot. So we have that, but we can also scroll over here and we can select hue versus hue. So that's going to let us change specific hues, hue versus saturation. If I want to like adjust the blue saturation, it's too dense, or hue versus luminance. If you can bring like all yellows, I want them to be darker, I can do that and select those. So I'm going to go to hue versus hue, and I'm just going to kind of select up here, and I'm going to change our hue just a little bit there. And then we'll see here if that's looking a little bit better. So that to me is looking a little bit nicer, a little less green. And I mean, the one thing we can't totally change is the light that's hitting these people. That's something you're just going to have to either deal with or address as you're shooting. Like we have a lot more diffused light on this mountain image than we do on this cafe. We're getting a lot more like bright highlights. Um, if we go to our HDR, we can like adjust just the top light areas and try to boost those up a little bit, but we are going to lose a lot of that background as well. So it's kind of a push and pull as to exactly what you want to do with that, how much you're willing to lose. And we can go back to our qualifier here and check like, let's see, this is kind of like an orangey color right there, an orangey color right here. And we can try and see how split those RGB circles are on our waveform. If you have similar colors, or like this whitish gray right here versus this kind of white up here, And those are kind of, they're looking like they're bunched in a similar way when I get to the pure white, maybe a little more red in this image here. So if I want to just pop a little bit of red into this image, I can go to my primaries here and I can just add a touch of red. And so maybe I'm happy with that there. So I can check my image here. Okay. And so if I'm jumping from tundra to cafe, I would be happy with that for, 10 minutes of adjustments on this shot. And just to kind of look at where we came from, we can select this. So we started here, brought it to here. That's a pretty decent change in just a couple of minutes. But sometimes you're working with a lot of clips, right? And you don't have time to spend 5 minutes on each different clip. If you have them all in the same, like from the same camera, if they're like already cut up, you can copy and paste your attributes. Easy to do from the timeline here. Command C, at least on a Mac, and then Alt V. It's going to be Control C, and then I think Option V for a Windows computer. And that's just going to allow you to like select what attributes you want to paste on something. So I get color correction, I get zoom, position, all sorts of stuff, and I can paste that to all the other clips I want to put on there, as long as they're from the same scene. There is a really fast way to change clips. So if I have, like, let's say this is from a shoot we did a while ago, and it's just Rec 709. And I want it to look more like this shot here, maybe, or maybe let's do this one. I can have DaVinci Resolve auto shot match it. So if I have my clip selected and then I go to the clip I want to kind of emulate, I can right click, and then there's this shot match to this clip. I can click that and it's gonna try and like auto adjust this clip to shot match it. It looks like they're pretty close. So maybe I'll adjust this so it's more blue. And then I'll shot match my clip. Freezing. Well, I think I may have frozen Resolve. Just know you can shot match that way. I don't like doing it. I think it's really it usually looks pretty artificial, like you just adjusted like the tint or the temp, or like you slapped a LUT on. It's if you got to do a really quick kind of adjustment, you can do that. But I think it's better if you can go in and adjust things yourself. Just give yourself a couple minutes for each clip. There is another way to like view all of your clips together. We have in our gallery right here next to this kind of image wipe up at the top by our percentage, we have this gallery view that we can click on, and we can adjust what we're seeing here. So I like to do it with selected clips so I can choose what's sitting next to each other. So if I have this clip and I want to put this other clip next to it, of our one of our people sitting and giving a speech, I can command click, and that's going to place them side by side. And so then you can see the whole image rather than the split view. And you can add as many as you want. Just know that it's going to get smaller and smaller as you keep adding more. And so if you have a grouping of like this scene, we're in this location, and I want to get a quick like thumbnail view of all of the different shots, you can click all those on, and then you can just, kind of give it a once over, make sure, okay, yeah, those all look good. These do not all look good, so they would need some work. But that's a quick way to kind of get it all set up. You can also just select by like current groups. You can add shots to a group. So if I wanted to, let's get out of this here. Uh, we can add into a current group. We can add it into a new group. If we add it into a new group and just say people, and then we go up to here, we can go by our current group, and we can have all of those come up. And so if you went through your timeline and added, this is all of our A-roll in one group, you can have A-roll pop up, or all of our B-roll shots, you can have all of those pop up. Or maybe you do interior, exterior, whatever that is, whatever works for you. You can do that. Are there any questions or like scenarios that people run into when shot matching? Also, I'll just say these two clips, this is Blackmagic RAW. This is from a Nikon. It's a pretty different ecosystems, and you can get them looking pretty similar.
I have a quick
From your
question.
experience. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I have a quick question about where your mouse is hovering right now, these layers kind of on the right side, or I mean, as somebody who hasn't used, I use Premiere
Yep.
primarily, and that's what I was trained on, but I've dabbled in Resolve a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So is it like proper to think of those as like layers in Photoshop where each one's individually doing something?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you have this dragged around and set here is like the like workflow order in terms of like how it's going to export so that they don't interfere with each other.
Yeah. Yep. You can think of them as layers, just kind of stacked out linearly. Again, we have those parallel, which is a little bit different because you can kind of combine those into one. Maybe that's like adding a adjustment mask to a select
Mm-hmm.
layer. But yeah, so you can kind of have these laid out, and they just move with these arrows. You can see it move through. And so that'll be the kind of pathway out. And so I have my conversion to Rec 709 at the end here, and then I have some things after it. I'd put a little bit of noise reduction and a little bit of sharpening on this, just because this clip is it's really zoomed in. The original clip has like this color board in there, but I didn't want to use that for like shot matching. If you have a color checker and can use that, definitely do it. But yeah, so these are they're just nodes, and they kind of work as those as layers would. It looks more confusing than it is. And if you like label them, it makes it a lot easier to kind of see your progression through.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested in DaVinci Resolve, they have a free version, and you can do everything that we did except for some noise reduction stuff in the free version. You can export in 4K. I think it limits you to just 4K exports. I'm assuming none of us are exporting in 8K. If you are, I don't know why you're doing that. But yeah, so the free version's great, especially if you just want to kind of test it out. Any other questions or scenarios?
My question is from your experiences between camera, Nikon, Sony. How do you feel their colors push in direction? Like if you had to give them like a general, like, oh, Nikon's this, Sony's this,
Yeah.
like your common color corrections that you'd use for each one.
Yeah. So, and they're changing more recently. I think like 3-4 years ago, they all had kind of a certain cast to them. I think they're all starting to get a bit better now, as like pretty much every camera that's come out in the last like 2 years is amazing. But I think Sony used to sit pretty green. It's kind of dialed it more towards neutral a little bit more recently. I haven't used Nikon in a long time, since like the D3200, which is like when I was in like high school. So this is my first look. This is from the Z6 III, I think.
Okay.
But to my eye, it's a little bit magenta, and I don't know if that's just their grade on there or what, but yeah, it feels a little magenta, maybe a little bit low contrast. Black Magic, I think, usually sits a little bit warmer, a little bit more yellow, maybe a touch more green. I think Black Magic has a really nice image. It's really easy to grade too. At our school, we used the Panasonic Lumix cameras, and those I think sit really magenta. So I do a lot of magenta correction on that, and they really pump orange as like a highlighter color. And one of our school colors is orange, so I do have to do a lot of like work kind of toning down oranges. But aside from that, I like the skin tone representation. Uh, we don't use ARRI cameras, so I can't speak to that, or RED. We're too small of a school to have those kind of cameras. But if you're working with like a raw workflow, you can do whatever you want. You kind of have just like free reign. It's going to take more work, but you can get any color pretty much. Trying to think what other companies. Canon, I think, still sits a little red. I'm not a huge fan of Canon colors. I'm sorry if I offend anyone. But I think you can kind of adjust anything to your taste at this point, especially with all the log formats that people have. So every camera almost can shoot like whatever flavor of log.
Another question for you. Back to that cafe shot, there was a color
Yeah.
checker card. I've only ever
Yes.
used it for like gaining like a white balance and stuff like that. Have you
Yep.
ever used the actual color tones on it to super accurately color correct something that had to be so color accurate that you were using all those color tones on top of the color checker?
Yeah, I think I've also only ever just used it just for white balance correction. I think if you wanna use this as like, so you call it like your hero shot, whatever you're kind of parked on to like adjust. If you want to do that and like fine tune your like yellows and your blues to kind of sit the same, I think that's great. I think it's probably a really useful way to do it. We don't usually have that much time to spend on each individual shot to do something like that. So aside from just getting like white balance, that's probably all I'll use it for. But I think, yeah, if you want like a clear representation of what colors are looking like, there's no better way to do it than with like an actual color checker. I would just say make sure you have it wherever your like main talent is, just because the light's gonna hit different areas of your scene differently. So have them hold it and get one as big as possible, especially for like wide shots. Anything else? Okay, we can go over some more advanced Da Vinci stuff if we want, with like the next like couple minutes. Let me take that off. This is the nlog base. Let me just grab this. Let's do Nikon. Oh, I'm not sure if Da Vinci is updated to Nikon's log yet. Again, I don't use it, so I don't know if they have a different name for it. So we're going to use this Blackmagic clip instead. So I'm just selecting the color space and gamma that it was shot on. 710.5, okay. And so I think something that I like to do a lot of is work with power windows. So my PW1, 2, and 3. Another great thing about DaVinci Resolve is how easily it can track power windows onto different areas. So if I come to here, this little ellipse, I can get to my power windows area, and I can add like a circle, we'll feather it out. And let's say I just want to add a little bit of brightness to this area, to the face, just to kind of, you know, draw the eye straight to this person's face. But if they move through this scene and it didn't just like sit there, it's going to be hard to, you're going to see that like kind of halo move around or like sit in the same spot. So you can track these on really easily, this little tracker. And then I just have it set to clip, and it's set right up here to tracking power windows. You can track effects or camera shake as well. You click this back and forth, and then it just auto tracks it. And it pulls points for you. You don't have to like, I know in like After Effects, you have to like create a null, and then you have to like select 3 points, create a triangle, and then parent that to the null, and then parent whatever you're putting on to that. It's a long process. This is just like, boom, it's done. And it's like perfectly tracked to this person's face. I'm not sure if this is in the free version or not. I think it is. And maybe just not as robust, maybe not as quick. I think you lose some like GPU encoding and stuff like that. But you can do a bunch of different ones. Like, let's say I want to add another, and I'm going to do just like a square down here. Let's say we want to add that like dark corner. We're doing a Dutch painting style, and we want the bottom left corner to be really dark. And I can just like darken that. Maybe we'll fade this out a little bit. And then I can track that in. That'll track in. And I have perspective selected as well. So it's going to get some perspective shifts as we kind of rotate our camera around them. And you can select that off if you don't want it. Like maybe I don't want perspective. And then I can just retrack it. We'll reset this. And then track like that. And then it's just doing zoom. So it's kind of looking kind of weird because they're zooming back, but yeah, that's really great. I think I'll plug 2 different plugins that I like to use. Shift is great. It only costs like $20. Let me turn this off. At least you at one point only cost $20. I'm not totally sure now. I haven't looked at it in a while. But you can add some really like nice like subtractive color. That's going to be kind of like density. And you can adjust a clip really quick and get a nice look within a couple of minutes here. Again. And so this one little node is doing all of this in like a couple of like 30 seconds. So I like to use this if I'm doing like more of a look. So maybe if you're doing like a piece for a sports team and you have more creativity, like maybe admissions or like marketing won't want something like this, but you know, you can go a little bit more crazy. Or a dehancer. Some people may have heard of this. It's like a film emulation plugin. So you have all these different film stocks that you can choose from. Let's say we want Fuji Color Superior 200. And then they have like an inbuilt film grain that you can adjust, palation, bloom. And it's just a good tool to do things really quickly. But the new Resolve has its own film look creator in it. And so you can do this, you can do all this stuff manually. And this is pretty expensive. I think it's like $500. So if you don't want to spend that on it, you don't have to.
John, did you already go over magic masks?
Magic Mask. I haven't gone over Magic Masks. Magic Mask is cool. You can, let me just pull this off. You can like draw over a person and it'll create a mask for you of that person. Let me do this is blocking. So this is kind of like it's using their like neural engine, their like AI engine, I guess. It's kind of like Photoshop where you can like have it like select a subject or something like that. Or like After Effects has stuff like this where you can like select certain areas. Um,
And this does it frame by frame by frame.
yes, so I can track this frame by frame. You can see it's not perfect. This scene is kind of crazy with the power windows. This will take a bit of time though. Like it's pretty intense on your computer. If you got like a beefy like PC, I think it's great. I just got a little MacBook, so we only tracked a couple of frames there. I think power windows is, if you can get by just using power windows, way easier and way quicker. And I think doing whatever is faster and easier is the way to go. Some of like the cool tools that you have, like there's a lot of stuff here, like face refinement or depth map. Depth map's pretty cool. You can adjust based on like the z-axis of your image. But a lot of it's really niche for when you need it. And it just is going to slow down your computer. So a lot of it you can do with like manual tracking of like power windows. Like, oh, I just want this side of the face brighter. I can just track a little, like a hand-drawn mask on that face, and then we're good to go. Let's see. Any other questions or things people are wondering about or that I should go over quick?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for all this great info. I'm at the very basic level of color grading right now, just making it work
Yep.
in Premiere. But
Mhm.
recently I've been running into like my file in Premiere, when I export it, it looks so different and it looks flat and muted.
Yep.
And I don't know
Yep.
if there's like a setting I should be looking for.
Yeah, so that goes to like our gamma correction. So when we're saying like Rec 709 gamma 2.4, depending on what computer you're using, if you're using a Mac, they
I am.
have, yeah, so Macs, they really make me annoyed, because they have a different gamma that they run on screen. So I think it's like closer to like gamma 1.8. So what you're adjusting is going to be different than what like YouTube might use for their input gamma. I think standard web is like gamma 2.2. And this just kind of goes back to like calibrating your screen. If you can calibrate your screen to like gamma 2.4, if all of your stuff is just going on the internet, gamma 2.2, you can get a better idea of what it's actually going to look like. There are going to be shifts on different screens, kind of no matter what, because every manufacturer is doing little different tweaks with their panels. But yeah, it's kind of an ongoing issue for a lot of people. That's why I like DaVinci, because I can set that all manually. I think you can do it in Premiere as well. I haven't used Premiere in a while, but I'm sure there are ways, or there are like LUTs that you can like drop in for like gamma correction. But you can get lost in forms with that issue for a long time.
So you said maybe work on calibrating the screen.
Yeah,
to
calibrate
gamma
this
2.4.
2.2 or 2.4. Yeah.
Okay.
2.4 is like industry standard for like broadcast. 2.2, I think, is what the web uses. Or it's like a weird sliding scale. But yeah. And if anyone has any questions specifically like that, or just want to know more about things, you can email me. This is my school email up on screen right now, or send me a DM on Instagram. I'm happy to talk about specific scenarios you're running into, or just like more broad information. We skipped a bit of this presentation just for like time. I don't want to take up any more of people's time. I'm sure people have other projects that they got to work on. But yeah, reach out, send me a message. We can hop on a Zoom if you like, or whatever.
Does anyone have any other questions for John before we? Oh, Ariel, I like your celebrations emojis. I haven't been on Zoom in a long time. That's a new thing for me. We got a couple of thank yous in the chat. John, thank you for taking the time to go through this. I know for some of us, it's sometimes our first look at DaVinci Resolve. That was my first look at scopes and how they
Yeah.
like. I've been on video sets. Like my job before this was working for a broadcast company and being on TV, and I look at like their false colors and things like, what are you even looking at? You guys are crazy, kind of thing. But now that I have an understanding, I'm one of the crazy guys too. So
yeah, it's great, and it's so helpful. It seems really scary at first, but once you kind of get like learn what it's actually talking about, it's all pretty simple stuff. So
perfect. Other than that, if no one has any questions, I'll go ahead and end this meeting. John listed his Instagram account and his email address if you have any more intense questions that you feel like you needed some one-on-one with it. John, I'm sure, is more than happy to answer those questions. Than that, everyone have a great day. Thanks for attending this session. I appreciate it, everyone.
thank you guys.